And Demidov is very clear. If you are training something, and if you are delaying the most essential things until day 2, it's too late, right? Subconscious creativity, instinctual subconscious creativity, transformation, and of course, the circumstances, and everything else that is essential, all of it, relationships, time, place, audience even, right? All of it is present in the Demidov Etudes, inspiration. All of it is present in the Demidov Etudes and introduced day 1 at once through this ingenious exercise called Demidov Etudes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unlocking Creativity. I am Nolan Hennelly, an actor based in New York City, and currently about to finish up my teacher certification training with the Demidov Association. And I'm joined by, as always, Kimon Fioretos from Greece, who is also about to finish his certification in the teacher training program. And we are both joined by Andrei Malaev-Babel, the certifying master teacher of the Demidov Association. And today we're just going to get right to it. We're talking about something that is so integral and so important to our work on a daily basis. And the question for today really, and I'll let Andrei, you take it away right away, is what is an etude?
First, thank you, Nolan and Kimon, for doing this, because this is certainly a job of enlightening a lot of people regarding the Demidov School of Acting, about Demidov. And I think you can't wait to graduate. Guys, it's only been 4 years. What's going on? Etudes. Yes. The biggest question about etudes, this being a foreign word, right? Do we italicize it or not? As if we decide that, we know everything. Etude, as far as I am aware, comes from French, and it means study in French. And when it comes to what it is that we are studying, this is where we have variety. Because if we go to music or if we go to visual art and painting, they have had their etudes for centuries now, right? Painters paint their etudes. These etudes could be a study of certain object, animate or inanimate, which is just my way to study my technique, to study that particular object, and I'm not necessarily studying it for any particular larger work of art. Painters also do etudes that are related to larger paintings. So they take an isolated smaller object from a larger painting and they begin to study it and paint etude after etude after etude. Can you call it a sketch? I suppose you could, right? But they do call it etudes. And these etudes serve as a preliminary work for a larger painting, for a larger work of art. The same with musicians. We know a lot of great composers who have been writing a lot of etudes, and these etudes are used by students of music. They play them as they're training, but these etudes were also something that the composer was pursuing. They were studying something, and so by writing this very short piece of music, they were tackling very particular, sometimes technical goal in terms of developing their art, in terms of developing as an artist through this miniature study. Obviously, these etudes are, a symphony in miniature, right? A concerto in miniature. And of course, sometimes the etude for a work of art is a work of art in miniature. Very often, these etudes, or at least there were periods of time where, when it came to collectors, they were very valuable, sometimes almost more valuable than the work of art itself. And it's true because very often they have spontaneity, freshness, and unpredictability and kind of life pulsating through them that the finished work of art doesn't have. Why? Because as they were painting their etude, as they were sketching it, they were free, they were carefree in a way. And as they labored and labored and labored over the finished work of art, they basically overdid it. That also happens. Or maybe they underdo it, who knows? But there's something about it that is making the spontaneity, freshness of the etude of the sketch very valuable. So that's in terms of what etudes have been and continue to be in music and in visual arts. When it comes to acting etudes, which is of course what we are talking about, Demidov etudes, then really that term comes into actor training, into rehearsal techniques kind of realm with Stanislavski. And when you hear etude in reference to rehearsal work, in reference to actor training, you certainly immediately think of Stanislavskian etudes. But God knows they're so different from what Demidov has created. So this is a little introduction. I thought that maybe we want to take a quick look at the word etude, where it comes from, what it means in other professions, right? A study of what? That varies. But ultimately, we can look at two different kinds of study. The study of the piece of art, of the work of art, that I am working on right now, and then it becomes a little bit more narrow and utilitarian, if you follow me, or the study of my technique. And then it becomes, of course, broader and more connected with pedagogy and more connected with refinement and development of myself as an artist, as an actor. And this is where we're also coming to the major difference between Stanislavski and Demidov, where Stanislavski's major focus is not the actor and the actor's process. It is really the final result, the work of art, the performance. And Demidov's major focus is the actor. Demidov's subject is the actor. And Stanislavski's subject is the play, the performance. That alone, of course, sets them apart and separates them very, very strongly. Demidov is working on you as a creative individual. Stanislavski needs you to produce a perfect play. That's why he can do the kind of shortcuts that Demidov would never do, because ultimately, if it serves the purpose of squeezing you into that particular role, that's what we need, right? And it's not necessarily about your development and growth as a creative individual. Why? Stanislavski didn't care about it? No, of course he did. But he was predominantly a director and a producer. Those were his concerns, right? And he knew that on the opening night, it needs to look good. And not only on the opening night, obviously, which is why he actually used a lot of shortcuts, auxiliary devices, a lot of kind of techniques that from the pedagogical standpoint are actually maybe even harmful, but from the standpoint of putting together a solid production, right, are rather useful. And yes, Stanislavski certainly was an artist first and foremost. And yes, he cared about art. But it does take a toll on you when you've been producing for decades, right? And when you've been directing and needing to open the performances. Although, of course, Moscow Art Theater, unlike many other companies, has been known to delay opening nights, sometimes significantly, because that work of art wasn't up to their highest standards of excellence. And yet Demidov's were higher yet.
Andrei, after 4 years, I've come to, with your teaching in your direction, I've come to see etudes as small miracles, as we call them sometimes. And there is a huge difference now that we're talking about Stanislavski, because if somebody sits down and tries to see the literature, either via Michael Chekhov or Vakhtangov or Stanislavski. In Stanislavski, they're going to see that through active analysis, he's always doing etudes, scenes between the acts or scenes between the scenes. He's working with the text, or he's working the actor trying to improvise a text. And Michael Chekhov, usually he'll give a theme, or Vakhtangov will give a theme, and the etude is about improvisation again. And there is a huge difference between our improvisations, quote unquote, meaning the Demidov etudes, and their etudes. Because for Stanislavski, like you said, he's aiming towards the play and the final result. The others are aiming towards improvisation, and ours are completely different. They don't necessarily try to get to a result, but they are working the actor himself as a creative individual, as a creative artist. They have something very peculiar that any of the techniques I know don't have. They use written language from day one.
Yeah.
Which for me is very impressive.
Definitely. Well, as you mentioned, Stanislavski etude could be dedicated to the gaps in the play, right? What happens right prior to the start of the act, what happens in between the acts. It also is, and that is the so-called method of active analysis, right? It is also used to etude the actual scenes of the play. But as you are rightly said, in the Stanislavskian etude, the text is improvised by the actor. The actor is using her or his own words to approximate what the character is saying. As a result, of course, they approximate the hell out of the character, because unless they're great playwrights, they're not going to speak like the character does. And because they're not yet in character, obviously, they are using their beloved familiar persona, substituting that character for their beloved familiar persona, as Demidov would call it. And as they're using those kind of words rather than words written by Chekhov and Shakespeare, obviously they are approximating characters, circumstances, relationships, everything. And we will talk about it. Then the moment comes when Stanislavski says to them, or somebody working according to this approach, and now let's transition to the words of the author, and everything crashes. Any life, any truth, anything that has been found through etudes collapses, because now they cannot use their own words. They need to use the words of the author. And even Maria Knebel, somebody who is responsible for developing that technique, the so-called active analysis or method of physical actions, even Maria Knebel herself admits in her book that the transition from the actor's own words to the words of the author, the character, is an unresolved aspect of this approach. And I'm very, very sorry. Then the question is, why do you need the approach? It's clearly something that Stanislavski would discard later on, as he discarded so many of his devices that did not work, that did not help him achieve the ultimate goal. But disciples, of course, are going to use all of the scraps, and they're never going to discard anything like Stanislavski used to do. So that's what these etudes are mostly about. However, if you go to any theater school, acting school, film school in Russia or anywhere else where they're following Stanislavski, they will also use etudes in training. These etudes are not connected to any plays, which kind of makes them a little bit closer to Demidov etudes. But let's look at how they're constructed. So Nolan and I are called to do an etude. We then go to a separate room while the rest of the class is continuing with whatever they're doing, and we agree. We agree on who Nolan is and who I am, who our characters are. We agree on our relationship, on our past history. We even agree on what Nolan wants from me, the Stanislavskian task and objective, right? And what I want from Nolan. We can even agree what actions we're going to use in order to get this from each other. We agree on the time, we agree on the place, where we are coming from, where we're going afterwards. In other words, we analyze the whole etude. what is it that we improvise? Words. The words to achieve these goals, the words of the etude are completely ours. We improvise them. So that's where Demidov is ultimately a Stanislavski etude backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Why? Well, let's start with this. When do actors ever need to improvise words? The words are given to them by Sarah Rule, by Chekhov, by Shakespeare, right? By Hellman, by really, really significant playwrights. Needless to say, these playwrights are a little bit better at coming up with words than these actors. Even if these actors, in addition to acting skill, also happen to have some kind of dramaturgical skill, the skill of a playwright, and some do. Those are the actors, by the way, who have a blast doing Stanislavski and etudes, right? Not because they're really exercising their acting abilities, but because they're exercising their playwriting abilities. But because actors never have to improvise the lines, except in improv, of course, right? But that's not what we are teaching, and that's not what we're talking about. They actually don't need that skill. What skill do they need? They need the skill of having the text, and the text being the absolute given that is non-negotiable, and physicalizing based on that text characters, relationships, if you wish, tasks and objectives, although we're never aware of them, circumstances, the past, the present, the time, the space, right? All of these things must physicalize. And that's the skill of the actor. And you can do it spontaneously, you can do it in your sleep, you can do it instinctually. You're a great actor. You're given just the text, which is what you get as an actor, the play. That play doesn't come with instructions. Nobody says to you how to extract from that play character, relationships, circumstances, active tasks, if you believe in this nonsense, right? But the text is there, and it has inside it all of it. How do I, preferably instinctually, subconsciously, physicalize it, materialize it, excuse me, and how do I actually learn that skill as something that is accessible to me on a daily basis? And that's exactly what a Demidov etude does, because as you very well know, all we get is a text. Sometimes it's 2 lines, sometimes 4 lines of a dialogue, 6, 8, 10, right? We start with 2, question and answer usually, and that's how Demidov used to call these etudes to begin with. They were called questions and answers, where I ask a question, Nolan answers it. But we don't know when we are given the question and the answer who we are, where are we coming from, where are we going. We don't know our relationship, our given circumstances, place, time. We know nothing. And this is where the miracle comes in, right, Kimon? Because having just repeated blandly in a blah, blah, blah kind of way without any predecision, this question and answer for a few moments, for a minute or two, we then walk into the stage space and become characters, create relationships, create past, present, and future, create circumstances. All of it is either created by us or created beyond us, around us, inside us. We transform physically and psychologically and vocally, and the rest is history. Having never predecided any of it, having never predetermined any of it, having never pre-agreed, pre-analyzed any of it. And as we do it every day, because also Demidov makes scales out of these etudes, something you are playing on a regular basis. Another term borrowed from music, right? Scales. Because Demidov makes it scales that are played daily or almost daily in his curriculum. It becomes our second nature. So needless to say, we could receive any text and accurately so that no dramaturg would ever be able to say that we did not interpret that text accurately and correctly, completely accurately, but artistically, creatively, not analytically. We become the text, we embody the text, as well as the circumstances and the relationships, the place and time, all of it materializes. And that is ultimately the only skill that an actor needs to possess, that Demidov teaches the actor. Because if you have that skill, once you are given a scene, a play, a character that actually gives you all of this information, right, that you need, and much more than any fragmented piece of text might, which is what Etude is. When you give we given the whole play, it becomes a piece of cake. If you know how to submerge that text into your subconscious self, which is what the Etudes are teaching you, because of the way that you're engaging with the words before you go on stage. And that's a separate conversation. If you do the same thing with the text of the play will come to life, the character will come to life, everything will come to life. And it will be physical, tangible. It will be actually happening. Not like most of the performances that we have seen where actors are talking about it happening, but none of it is actually happening. Nobody is in love with anyone, actually. Nobody really hates anyone. Well, hate, it comes easier, right? Because, of course, yeah, I happen to hate my partner, right? Because my partner doesn't do what I want them to do. I'm kidding, of course. All I'm saying is easier to play hate than it is to play love.
Of course.
Much easier. So that's why all of these relationships, all of these events, the characters keep talking about them, but they're not really in the place. They're not really in the air. They're not really representing this charged space between the two partners. The space between the two partners is psychologically void. They're just blah, blah, blahing about these issues. Not with Demidov. All of these things, circumstances, relationships, place, time, right? It's all physically present in the space, as if tangible objects. And therefore, it affects the actor in a completely non-cerebral, but very powerful visceral way. The actor reacts in that powerful way, and you actually get theater of film, real theater, real film. And it can happen with anyone. We can take a stranger off the street, a non-actor, and in a couple of hours, they'll be able to begin to do it. That's how seemingly simple it is. Needless to say, that stranger may not decide to develop into an actor, right? But we can literally, by the end of a couple of hours, make somebody walking also into the space unaware think that this is actually a significant actor in front of them. Significant meaning operating upon the same principles as all of these great actors that you actually respect. Pacino, De Niro, right? You name it. So that's what Demidov Etudes are about. And certainly you are right. They're about the actor. They're about ability and nothing else. Because if Stanislavski and Etudes are teaching you to transform narrowly into this particular character that you are currently working on, then the Demidov Etude is teaching transformability, your ability to transform into any character at a slightest provocation. There is a huge difference.
One of the things that when I got acquainted with the technique that made me cry out finally was the fact that Demidov uses the written language from day one, and you keep saying at the beginning was the word. And the fact that...
Well, there was somebody else who said it before me, but yeah, I keep repeating it. Yeah,
I know. But the thing is that most of the techniques that I know, and I've been teaching for many years, they still try to figure out how to transition from improvisation to the written word.
Right.
They go as far, and I'm not going to name anything, but they go as far sometimes to create a dichotomy between the actor and the text by saying the text is the enemy of the actor. Why? Because if you give them a text without the technique that we have from day one, they're going to be smacked. But this is completely different because the way we're doing it, the way the etudes are doing it, the way the school is doing it, doesn't allow that. It takes you in a different, completely subconscious path in a way that everything comes out spontaneously, without straining, without trying to do anything. And that's the beauty of it.
Yes, so Demidov basically does something that one of the characters of a famous French novel has done, and Demidov actually talks about this example. That character walked into a city that was populated by fools, and these fools, being very foolish, built houses without windows or doors, right? And so, needless to say, these houses were completely dark. They were pitch dark. Maybe there was one exit, right? But ultimately, no windows. And the fools had to deal with it. So they took sacks made of burlap and took these sacks into the dark buildings. And then they put the darkness inside the sacks, and they were carrying the darkness out of these buildings by these huge sacks, one by another, right? Needless to say, trying to carry the darkness out that way did not produce any result until the main character of the novel came in and simply brought a candle into the dark building. So that's what Demidov does. He brings a candle. They all trying to say, how are we going to transition from improvised lines to the written lines? And Demidov says very simply, by using written lines to begin. It's just so simple. It's just like bringing a candle. But people keep trying to take darkness out of the building, right, that they themselves built without windows for some reason, by carrying it out in huge sacks.
I think this is part of why I have found, especially now that I've, had the pleasure of getting to share etudes with people from a teacher's perspective. We've known for a while that students enjoy doing etudes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason why is because if you were a non-actor, like you were saying, someone off the street, and you think you're going into an acting class, somewhere in your heart of hearts, you imagine you're going to be given a text. And I've found so many actors when they go into an acting class and they're told instead, we're going to be doing Meisnerian repetitions. No, we'll be improvising all the lines. There's something about them. Their system somehow goes, no, this doesn't quite feel right.
Yeah.
And the teacher will, kind of explain, well, eventually you'll get the text. The text will be given when you're ready, as though it's some kind of reward, for good behavior. You've put up with these things I've put you through, and then you'll
Or
get
as
your
you
text.
said, Nolan, as you said, for suffering.
Yeah.
It's a reward for suffering, because you're right, they hate doing it.
Yeah.
Every actor who is about to be assigned a Stanislavski an etude inwardly goes, ugh,
Yeah.
right? Just as the Demidov actors rush on stage, cannot wait. When you say to them, okay, what kind of text should I give you, right? They are absolutely elated. They are ready. They are eager. And this other kind of work, you're right, Nolan, you're absolutely right. Actors hate it because inwardly the actor's instinct, indestructible actor's instinct inside them, begins to protest. Because that instinct is always right. It knows what's good and what's bad. It's indestructible. It is present inside every actor. And the actor ultimately is always right.
Yeah. I've seen these groups of 18-year-old actors get introduced to a different exercise in the beginning of class, and you can see it on their faces. There's some amount of them just goes, why? Why are we doing that, And I think, like I said, that's part of where the delight comes from. But I don't think it's all of it, because and to someone that's never done an etude, what I want to say about this, this kind of miraculous creation of the circumstance that kind of comes to the actor as they're, doing an etude with their partner. It almost has the sensation of when you find out you and your close friend have been thinking of the same thing for the last few minutes, and you realize that you are very much on the same page with that. And when you find out that you're in such a connection and communication with someone without any effort, there's a tremendous delight in that alone, which I think is so much a part of the etude experience for the actor.
Yes.
Can I add something to that? I think part of it is also the fact that via etudes, there is the sense of transformability that you don't find anywhere else. Most of the people ask you to be yourself all the time. You have to be yourself. You have to learn
I am
yourself
in the
to.
given circumstances, by the
Yes.
way, right? That's what these etudes, the Stanislavski etudes that I used in training, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're all I am in the given circumstances, as if it was possible. Please continue, Kimon.
No, but that's the thing. It's the fact that they feel inside of them. Oh, something changed. There was something there, and that's magic.
Yeah, and nobody is asking me I should remain myself, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's asking me, to remain myself, which is complete nonsense. So, okay, it's a pedagogical device that's used in all of the Stanislavskian schools and therefore everywhere else, where, oh, character is difficult. You don't want to start with character. You want to start with yourself. Okay, so it's me, but the circumstances are not mine, because all of these etudes are going to have circumstances that are different from your life, from your actual life. So the moment the circumstances are no longer mine, can I remain myself? Of course not. I have to transform. So Demidov makes it very clear, right? And again, why is it that that whole thing, I am in the given circumstances, that supposedly is legitimate and is used by all of these reputable schools as the first step of training, why is it that everybody, again, thank you, Nolan, inwardly smells the rat? And inwardly, right? Because it's an impossibility. You cannot be yourself in circumstances rather than your own. In order for you to be able to play yourself on stage, the circumstances have to completely match your actual life, and even those circumstances will be outdated tomorrow. So, it's impossible. Demidov does not create all of these false constructions. He, from the very beginning, says character. Look how you transformed. Look how you've become different, right? Again, the delaying of dealing with the written word, the delaying of dealing with the character, isn't it a tremendous tactical pedagogical mistake? And Demidov is very clear. If you're training something, and if you're delaying the most essential things until day 2, it's too late, right? Subconscious creativity, instinctual subconscious creativity, transformation, and of course, the circumstances, and everything else that is essential, all of it, relationships, time, place, audience even, right? All of it is present in the Demidov Etudes, inspiration, all of it is present in the Demidov Etudes and introduced day 1 at once through this ingenious exercise called Demidov Etudes, where nothing is left for day 2. Because if you are not training the actor's process in its totality, including transformation, of course, you are not training anything worth training. So this whole idea, oh, text later, right? Oh, characterization later, it is distorting the very process of actor creativity, right? And Demidov, of course, introduces written text, character, relationship, circumstances, audience, and everything else you can possibly think of, including transformation, of course. Day 1, including subconscious, of course, because of the way that we actually repeat these lines, the way that we forget them and empty and then follow our first immediate experience of reaction, right? All of it is nothing but a very elaborate way to engage our subconscious so that we are flowing a subconscious flow, so that we are entering, the subconscious flow of creativity. Because remember, we did not decide anything, so our brain is not really participating in it from the standpoint of I must hit particular marks and I must tell particular story. Our brain is becoming the character's brain. It's not worried about justifying the analysis now when I'm on stage. Nolan said something very important, and I want to emphasize it. Nolan, you compared this with you and your best friend have been thinking about the same thing for the last few minutes, and the two of you find out. It's actually very, very accurate. Because look what happens. Remember, the two actors never pre-decided who they are, never pre-decided what the relationship between them was. They were given a text. And the text is as simple as, are you going to be there tomorrow? I'm not sure, but I will really try. And suddenly, after they went and immersed themselves in this experience purely emotionally, not intellectually, the facilitator, that's how we call the Demidov teacher, the facilitator begins to ask them questions after the etude. And they find out that apparently they're friends, that for some reason one of them has an important event going on tomorrow, maybe an engagement, and for some reason they delayed telling their very good friend, like other people knew. And this other person found out about engagement from somebody else completely. And so they come and they confront their friend and say, how come you didn't tell me? Well, I didn't want to jinx it, whatever. Well, I didn't expect that. I thought I would be the first to know. Well, I certainly expect you there, right? And then at that point comes the text. Are you going to be there tomorrow? Well, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure, right? So all of it is not even cognized in the moment. It is cognized when you are comparing notes with the partner and facilitator is asking you questions. But the most important thing is that when you ask these two actors who never pre-decided, never discussed anything, never pre-agreed. So who was this other person? Was it like your brother or maybe father? No, I think it was my closest friend. And the other one says, yes, that's true. Absolutely. So where were you? Oh, I came to see him or her, right? Oh, really? You asked the other person. Oh, yeah, definitely. I was at home, but they came to see me. Okay, and that event tomorrow, like what is it? I think it's something like, I think I'm getting engaged. And the other one says, yes, absolutely, you are getting engaged. Nobody, of course, questions this. But if you really begin to think about it, it's a miracle. They simultaneously came up in the moment, mind you, without pre-discussion, right? With same circumstances, same relationships, same events, same past, same present, and same future. Because as I say, the Demidov etude is always born, conceived in these moments when you're just going over the lines without knowing even what they're about. It is conceived with its past, present, and future. Because that little text, are you going to be there tomorrow? Well, I'm not really sure, right? It has the past where you didn't invite me until the last moment and didn't tell me about the event. It has the present when we are actually, tackling the situation. And it has the future. I'm probably going to skip it because I'm insulted now. Do you see what I mean? But how is it possible without the lengthy table work? And how is it that they absolutely experienced all these emotions, all of these sensations in the moment and became these people in the moment without pre-deciding? Or is it exactly because they were not pre-deciding that they became these people? That's the real question. Is it because they were not analyzing the all life out of it that they became these people? What does it tell us about actors' process of creativity, where apparently they can receive just the words that don't even say who is talking to whom about what, and embody them very accurately so that no playwright, no dramaturg could ever say that they did not interpret the text correctly? So that is apparently the process of the act. That is apparently the skill of the actor, to embody the words, not to understand them, not to analyze them, not to talk smartly about them, not to pre-discuss or pre-decide them with a partner, but to embody them. And that explains, of course, how it was done in the Shakespearean theater. Because at the moment, right, I'm working with Kimon on a series of Instagram reels about the so-called original approach that talks about how at the original Globe, the Shakespearean actors, original great Shakespearean actors, did not see the play. They only saw their role. That's all they were given. They did not even know who is going to talk to them and what they're going to say, right? So, and of course, a lot of Shakespearean scholars and acting teachers don't believe that, even according to some scholarly research, this is how it was done, without hardly any rehearsing and without actors knowing the whole role. Excuse me, the whole play. They had the role.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment I heard it from Patrick Tucker's book, who just issued the Q scripts, which is what original Shakespearean actor would have, right, and acknowledged us, the Demidov Association, myself, FSU, Asolo Conservatory for Actor Training, where I've been teaching Demidov and where Nolan has graduated from, right? This acknowledgement comes because we actually did this in our acting classroom. We gave our actors just roles, and they went onto the stage having assigned these roles according to the Demidov approach, tossed them out, forgot them, emptied, and went into the opening of King Lear and then into the opening of Twelfth Night, and it was there. So when I heard about apparently the actors in the original Shakespeare theater did not really rehearse, they had 2 rehearsals mostly dedicated to dances and fencing and, choreography, and they did not have the whole play. They didn't know it, and they went into performance, and the freshness, spontaneity, power was unparalleled, right? When I heard that, I immediately said, and it couldn't be any other way. While most of the acting teachers and Shakespearean scholars say impossible.
That was one of the things I was thinking before, is someone watching this might think, when we talk about, the actors being so on the same page, it's impossible. And to that I say, if it sounds so good to you, you should try it. If it sounds so good to you, come to a workshop, come experience it for a couple of days, and you will be amazed and delighted by it's no trick of ours. It's your own artistry, right? It's the actor's own, as you said, unshakable truth. Yeah. Well,
Yeah. And there are a few chances to do it, right? Because we are moving towards the summer. And of course, in the summer, we traditionally do 2 intensives, because one builds onto another, and a special themed summer course. And this is, gentlemen, going to be 9th annual summer course, believe it or not. We started in Russia, outside of Moscow, in a scientific community of Pushchino. Then we brought the summer course to the Stanislavski House Museum in Moscow, the place where Stanislavski worked with Demidov on An Actor Prepares, the place where they collaborated on opera productions, because Stanislavski Opera Studio was residing inside this house. And of course, this is where Stanislavski rehearsed all of his final productions. He lived there and he rehearsed there for the last 17 years of his life. That's where we actually brought the summer course. And then in the summer of 2020, guess where that summer course went? Of course, online. And has been very successful in its online format, which actually is a theme for the next podcast. Training online.
Yeah.
Right? Because we were sitting here prior to this podcast trying to remember what else we wanted to discuss. And of course, now it came to me, right? Training online. So how is it possible that you are not in the same physical space with your partners and you are successfully training, you are successfully connecting with character, relationship, circumstances, and partnership? What about physicality? Physical touch is missing, right? And yet all of it resolves itself beautifully. So to kind of echo Nolan, come and train with us. This actually particular upcoming 9th annual Demidov summer course will be dedicated to film acting, Demidov and film acting. Their connection is very strong because Demidov, of course, is the only teacher of acting who does not approximate the truth, who insists on complete non-approximation of the truth. And camera immediately depicts even slightest deviation from truth. And there are many other reasons why Demidov is just beautifully suited to film. But also come and join us for the 2 intensives. try the first one, and I guarantee you will stay for the second. So it's a wonderful invitation for those of you who are listening to us and have been listening for a while. By the way, thank you for listening. And thinking, okay, they're talking miracles, they're talking impossibilities, they're talking wishful thinking. I echo Nolan, come and join, and you will experience firsthand a completely different state of being in the creative space and transitioning from everyday life seemingly to the imaginary life and not knowing the difference in a good way, right? All of it is miraculous or sounds miraculous, but has the Demidov School behind it. A school created not only by Stanislavski's most trusted associate over 30 years of collaboration, longer than with any other associate of Stanislavski's, but also by trained psychiatrists, trained psychologists, medical doctor, biologist, physiologist, and a person who is was deeply rooted in esoteric disciplines, including yoga. Nothing to sneeze at.
Well, let's leave it there for today. Thank you both so much as always. And you heard it here first, folks. You can join us for our next podcast, which will be about training online. So until then, thank you all so much for listening. All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.